It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH is back with another podcast episode. This time we traveled all the way up to McKnight Road. I went over a bridge, but not through a tunnel. We're going to find out about two ladies who are involved in the fitness field, but more importantly, they're involved in getting youth active. They are the co-founders, if I'm remembering my notes correctly, of something called Change the Game. We were with Joanna Papada, and I probably pronounced your name wrong, and Michelle Parolini. So ladies, thank you for taking time to join FitLabPGH.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
My first question that I would want to ask before we find out a little bit more about each one of you is, what is Change the Game? We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but to kind of bring people in case they don't want to hear your personal stories and they want to hear about Change the Game, we find out what it is just at the start, kind of the catch, and we'll come back later and get more of it.
Change the Game is a youth development program that we just decided that we didn't want to go through the normal circumstances to work with kids, like, grant funding or anything like that. So we went right to a school, and we said, we want to work with 10 of your juniors and seniors. And they said, okay, what do you want to do with them? And we said, we want to take them on hikes. We want to move them through the community, serve, but get them off their butts. And that's pretty much how Change the Game started.
How long ago was it?
7 years ago.
7 years ago. So we've got a little bit of conversation to talk about before we find out about the last 7 years. Both of you are involved in movement, but I guess the first question I always like to ask with FitLab Pittsburgh, because I'm not a Pittsburgh native, are you a Pittsburgh native? If you are, why are you still here? In other words, what do you do that allows you to stay here? If you're not a Pittsburgh native, what brought you here? And we'll start with Michelle.
I am a Pittsburgh native, born and raised. I actually spent a bit of time, about 9 years in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, doing commercial real estate. Moved back to Pittsburgh because it is home and it is one of the best cities around. I love the people and I love working here. I am a commercial real estate broker by trade, but I'm also a cycle instructor for Cycle Bar North Hills and a Pilates instructor at Club Pilates North Hills.
And Joanna, what about you? What keeps you here?
That's right. I'm not from Pittsburgh. A bunch of Danish people brought me here. I was supposed to be living in Denmark happily with a family and doing all the things you do as an adult. But life interfered and death interfered. And so I inherited a mother-in-law who was Danish and said, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't know. We moved to Pittsburgh because she had friends here. So that's how I got here. Why I stayed here, though, is because I really found a family here. And the family was not just a job, colleagues at work, but a family who really cared about whether I got up and moved and lived my life to the fullest. So.
And I'm always curious with people that we interview for FitLab Pittsburgh and the sister podcast, Moving to Live, is whether you were lifetime movers or whether you came into it. And I've told this before, I find there's typically two groups of people. There's the people that either mom and dad said, get the heck out of the house and go play until dinner time, or the whole family was involved in some sort of movement. We actually have an interview coming up with Reed of Reed and Company in Lawrenceville. And he said, my parents were active growing up, not really in exercise, but they owned an organic farm. So they had to keep the farm going, and that was activity. And having grown up on a dairy farm, I know exactly what he meant. But some people, they're just active as youth. Some people, at some point, they have an event later in life that says, I need to move. We interviewed John Platt, who unfortunately developed the disease MS, and he started to run after having MS. Some people go to college, really experience the college experience for the first year, 2 years, 3 years, and then say, ooh, I need to do something. So I'm kind of curious, Michelle, starting as a kid, or was this something that you got an adult, you got your commercial real estate license, and said, ooh, I need to do something to move also?
Well, actually, I was an active kid. I mean, I rode my bike and did kid stuff, but I was never into athletics. I wasn't, I was the manager of the basketball team. I didn't play. But as I got older, my parents took us out. My grandparents lived in the Laurel Highlands, so we would go there often and hike. And we did spend time outside, which I loved. But it really didn't hit me until I was about 30 years old, and I had a sort of a life event happen, and I needed to do something big, and I decided that running a marathon in Alaska was something that was big, and that's really was the impetus to my movement, and I never looked back.
Joanna, what about you?
I never thought about fitness or movement before. I thought about sports. I was a NCAA tennis player. Played tennis in the 70s when it was new, and anybody left-handed was recruited heavily.
I'm curious, do you wish they had the rackets now back then?
I do. I would be killing it. Sometime in Sports Illustrated, there's always this facts back in the day, what still records hold. And the quarterfinal match of my partner and I still there for most consecutive aces because we were both southpaws. But again, fitness, that was a sport, and it was the competitive piece of who I am. When I grew up and I started getting aches in the knees because tennis wasn't meant to go this way, lateral, my knees started to ache, and I started feeling just old. And, and so I walked into a Pilates class because they had a special and met Michelle, and that sort of, the new vocabulary came into my life. And that was 8 years ago. So I never thought of movement as anything but going out. I never thought, I'm going to go out for a nice hike today. No, that's not me. But if you want to play a game of tennis or anything like that, I'm in. But
still playing tennis then?
No, I wish I was playing more. Running's a little hard.
I sometimes wondered when I was in college, I went to a liberal arts college, why they had a physical education requirement for everybody. It was 2 classes, and my thought process was, well, I don't know why. But looking back, I realized these were lifetime sports. So these were jogging classes, these were tennis classes, golfing classes, things like that. And they were for, I think, a quarter credit or 1 credit, but they were all to give people ideas for lifetime sports. And the funny thing is, umpteen years later, I'm still running and biking, things that I started when I was in college. I'm curious also with both of you, parents, what do they think now, or what did they think when you started to get active, or family and friends? Because we talked a little bit before we started recording, even though there are pockets of people in Pittsburgh who are very, very active, in a good way, we're not Boulder, Colorado. In a bad way, we're not Boulder, Colorado. So what did your family and friends think, Joanna, when you first started doing stuff other than playing tennis, going to Pilates classes, et cetera?
Yeah. Today, my colleagues at work think I'm just crazy. I remember when I got my VO2 done a few years ago, and they said, wow, and the numbers were awesome. And I went back and was so proud of this. And they said, the folks who are younger than me and some my age are saying, this is not what's normal, Joanna. You shouldn't be doing this. Why are you getting up at 5:30 in the morning? Or why are you doing this? And it suddenly hits me when I watch their actions then, what they get for lunch at the lunch line or what they're doing. Everything is giving them an excuse not to be healthy and functional. And I only learned that through what I'm doing now. But yeah, I get really strange looks at me by that. And I blame her.
What about in your case, Michelle, the other real estate agents that you work with, what do they think?
Oh, they think it's awesome. But my mom passed away, but my mom and dad were the first two people I called when I finished my marathon, and my mother started crying and screaming, and she was so proud, and my dad was so proud. My sisters and my family, they think I'm crazy too, that you do all that crazy workout stuff. And again, why do you get up at 5:30 in the morning? I don't get up at 5:30. I start working out at 5:30, which means I get up at 4:30. But yeah, people look at you different. And it's just, I think, a different mindset. My husband thinks I'm insane too. But, it's something that I just went through a physical surgery that kept me off my feet for close to 9 months. And it was really clear to me that my exercise, everybody said, oh, it's so great, you can now relax. But for me, movement is the relaxation that I need. And so it feeds my mind, it feeds my emotion in a way that I don't think a lot of people can comprehend unless you experience it. And I don't think a lot of people push themselves to the point that they find that sweet side. And so, when you find that sweet side, you don't turn back. So.
Always love asking people we interview for FitLab Pittsburgh the most unusual, exciting, weird, or movement activity that you're most proud of that you've done in the past. So maybe you're hanging out with your friends and you want to say, well, look, I did this, or there's just something when you're sitting at home and saying, wow, I can't believe that. Michelle, what is it? Would that be the marathon?
Yes, hands down. And it was that we did it during the midnight sun. So it was beautiful. And I had to meet people from all across the country. It was that. And then the very next day we went whitewater rafting. So we rafted on a glacier river, the Lions Head River, off the Matanuska Glacier, and it was 10:30 at night and still, daylight. And, you finish, you're tired from the marathon, your feet are swollen, your knees hurt, and you've just rafted this gnarly river. And it was humbling. And it was the coolest feeling I have ever had in my entire life. Just being in the middle of all of that greatness and feeling so small and so, massively dominant at the same time. It was just a really cool feeling.
I know the first time I went whitewatering, it was literally the first time in my life to realize, oh, this is something that's more powerful. And if it decides that the current's going to take me in this direction, there's nothing I can do. And I think I was 22 or 23 and I'd never realized that before. Question, I follow up on that.
Yes.
Any plans on doing a marathon again? And to follow up on that also, have you whitewater rafted since then? Oh,
I've whitewater rafted all across the country. That wasn't my first river. I've rafted in Maine, in Colorado. I've rafted in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, all over the place. And I love it. Like you said, it's just something you don't control. You just have to roll with it. And I think it speaks to life, right? If you decide just to fight the current, you're probably going to have a really hard time. If you decide to go with the flow, then life kind of helps you out a little bit. So you paddle into it instead of paddling against it. And it really, really helps. But absolutely not going to do another marathon. My distance now is a 10K. I won't do anything larger than a 10K. I'm old. So I try to steer clear of running too much. But I like to cycle instead.
Joanna, what about you? What's the most unusual, most exciting movement activity that you're most proud of that you've done?
Good question. I don't think I have a big one like that. I think it was when we were in Yellowstone with the team of kids and working with Michelle, and we were trying to put together our week in the park and what we were going to do. And outside our cabin window was this mountain called Bunsen Peak. And Michelle went to the folks at Yellowstone. She said, well, can we climb that? And they said, sure. Why not do it? And so the first time we did it, it was end of June, and the paths were closed. And so we were climbing up the face of the whole mountain on the slip rock. And I don't do this stuff. I don't climb mountains or even hike. But I was watching every one of our kids struggling through the same process of doing this. And it hit me, and Michelle and I talked about this a lot afterwards. It was the only level playing field I could come up with, because it didn't get easier for me or Michelle or for the kids. So it's not unusual in that sense you're speaking of, but it was the accomplishment at the end was pretty special, especially when the kids who were crying on the way up got to be up there and look down, and it was phenomenal. And to repeat that again and again over our course of our work, yeah, there's nothing like it.
So you've done it again then?
We did. I think I personally did Bunsen 6-7 times, and then youth did more. Yeah. But then we went into Alaska and climbed a couple of 3,500-foot mountains as well, hiked up them from the base. So
a follow-up question I always ask for this: any movement-related activity that you want to do at some time in the future, Joanna?
I do. I want to go. I like to travel. I want to go to Bhutan, and I want to climb up to Tiger's Nest. Well, climb. It's a hike, but it's one of those hikes where it's 600 vertical steps down and then 200 up, and then very narrow, and it takes 2.5 hours or more. But yeah, only because there's a whole philosophy around mountains, right? We all feel different, and I think Buddha said it the best. It's what gives us life is to be on the top of the mountain like that. So, yeah.
What about you, Michelle? Any bucket list item that you want to do?
I would love to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in its completion.
I actually have a client whose daughter is looking into doing that. She's a few years out of college.
Give her my phone number.
Both of you are clearly meeting the ethos of FitLabPGH movement. It's part of what makes your life complete. You don't have to be a competitive athlete. It's just the recognition that the movement is what you do so you can do the things in life that you want to do. It sounds kind of crazy and sad, but the ideal thing to be able to do is to be able to do whatever you want to do and essentially fall down of a massive stroke while you're doing something. Hard for the family members and your friends, but really good for you. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about change the game, because a lot of people talk about doing things for kids or doing things for other people, and they can contribute to a GoFundMe thing or a Kickstarter campaign, or they can write a check, or they can say, I'm going to raise $300 and run the Pittsburgh Marathon to raise money for fill in your favorite charity. But to actually start an activity or to start what's the best definition of change the game? What is it defined as?
It's a program that works with 10th and 11th and 12th graders, Pittsburgh public school kids. Propel, actually, we work with a charter school and a small team. So our purpose is to create a team, family, being able to get out of your comfort zone and move. And we spend over 700 hours with them in weekends and summer and winter vacations, and we just keep moving. So together, we climb the same mountain, we raft the same river, things like that.
And you mentioned at the start of the interview that this has been going on for 7 years. What was the impetus? I know, Joanna, you said you took a Pilates class for Michelle, and that's how you two met, but it's not like you're hanging out and saying, let's have 3 or 4 beers. And then after 3 or 4 beers, hey, this sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. No, we had an opportunity to go to Yellowstone National Park. Funding came through. And Yellowstone was a couple years away from their centennial. And one of the pieces they wanted to have students learn to get this money, this funding, was live well and prosper. Eat well and prosper. And I didn't know anything about nutrition. And so I said, you want to come to Yellowstone for a week? And she said, sure. And we did. And we took a group of 12 kids at the time to Yellowstone and decided that on the way back home, Michelle looked at me and said, now what? I said, okay, we're done. We're going home. She said, no. There was something about a relationship we created with these young people that they want more. I want more, speaking of Michelle. So we're not going home. So on the cocktail napkin, on the airplane, we sketched out one of the first iterations of what Change the Game looked like.
What was it, the first trip to Yellowstone with the kids? How did that come about?
I found a funder was looking, because of the centennial, to bring more diversity to the park and have more Black people come to the park. Okay, so we knew how to get kids. We just walked into the school and say, we want to work with your kids. And, we passed all the tests, and they said, okay.
So you just, for the lack of a better term, became aware of a funding opportunity and said, hey, this would be a good idea for people.
Who doesn't want to go to Yellowstone?
I'd like to go to Yellowstone.
Yeah. And after 17 trips there, Michelle and I are pretty confident that, that was the...
So A Cocktail in Acton gives Change the Game the idea. You've been in existence for 7 years. And this, I believe you said a few minutes ago, this is for 7th and 8th graders?
No.
I'm sorry, 11th and 12th graders.
Correct. So those kids ready to go out in the world, and how are they going to do it? They're not out of their comfort zone. I love, Michelle said this a long time ago, I'm talking about it. Sorry. They're bubble wrapped. And when they get their diploma and come off the stage, they rip the bubble wrap off of them, and suddenly there's no more blessings in a backpack. There's no more free bus transportation, and they don't know how to get from point A to B. Because we don't do that in school. That's not about what education is. So we give them the opportunity to talk, to network with adults that aren't in their life currently. We bring people in their lives that they can walk the same trail with. So that's what's really the key stepping stone here. It's to really get kids ready for life outside of high school.
How do you decide which school to work with? You said you work with the Pittsburgh City Public Schools and a charter school. How did you come up with the charter school as the idea, or was this happenstance?
We actually had an event, and we had a number of our kids from our first year, first and second year, I think it was, come in and talk, and it was our launch, the Change the Game launch event, after we had done our beta testing around, a couple of years. And we had a gentleman come to the launch who was Jeremy. Jeremy
Resnick is the head of Propel Charter Schools.
So, and he came up and he said, hey, I would like to talk to you guys further about this. And so we were actually approached, which was amazing. And so we talked to him a little bit further. He hooked us into his school, and we've been working with Propel Braddock Hills High School for the last 5 years.
How is somebody selected, or how does somebody, when they're a junior, become involved with Change the Game? First of all, obviously, they have to go to that particular school.
Yep, actually, absolutely. So we go in and we do some recruiting. We talk to the kids. We go to the science classes, every science class, because every kid has to have science throughout their day. And so we do our presentation. We have some of our alumni who are coming back. They have an opportunity to come back for their second year if they choose to do so. And we've had everybody choose to do so. So they come in and they speak to the kids that are in their junior class, and they say, you guys really should do this, and here's why. And then there's a 9-page application. Because they're going to college soon, so they need to know how to fill out a long application, right? Patience and understanding how to use their words.
Some of us chose colleges to apply for that took the common application.
So they fill out their 9-page application. They're required to get referral letters from non-relatives. And then we talk to their teachers, and then we interview them. So they actually do go through a small interview process, and
one excuse. That's all they get.
They get one excused absence
not to show up
the year.
How many people typically apply, say, the last 2 years since you've been around for quite a while?
29, 30.
And how many people get selected?
10. So it's, but it's, it's life. It's kind of how life works, right?
It's not a participation trophy. It's you're one of the 10 winners.
That's right.
What's preventing you from doing more than 10 people?
So that's a good question. The way that I look at it, you have a very difficult time building a relationship with somebody who you can't spend time with. And if you have a group of 4 coaches or even 6 coaches and you go bigger than a 3-to-1 ratio, you're not going to have an opportunity to get to know each young person. And in order to meet them where they are, you have to actually know where they are. Asking their questions, finding out what they need in their life. And each of our students has something different that they need. So as a coach, as a Pilates coach, as a cycle instructor, whatever, as a trainer, I would meet with you, find out what your goals are, and then craft the plan to get you there, or to walk beside you to help you get yourself there. And that's what we like to do with our kids. And if we go larger than that, I think it takes some of that personality out of it. Our kids our goal is to build an extended family unit for our kids. And in order for us to do that, we have to be cognizant to maintain that small number. It's really important for us.
I know this is a big question. People are probably listening to this. What funds this? Do you have corporate donors? Do you have fundraisers?
I'm going to let Joanna take this one.
We have a contract with Propel. They support a chunk of the programming cost. We don't have, there's no one getting paid. There's no administrative cost in terms of salaries. Everybody's volunteering. And I'll go backtrack a second, only because the kids, when we asked them, said, here's what we want. We want adults to spend time with us who aren't getting paid or who aren't their parents. And number two, we want you guys to open up your network to us because it's who you know, not what you know. So based on that was part of the early cocktail napkin work. But we have a lot of good friends, who believe really in the mission and trying to not change people, but have them be the change in their own life. Because God, forgive us, but we're not going to say, I changed you today by taking this hike up Bunsen Peak. That's not what we're about. But you're going to find out what that view's like for the first time in your life and feel empowered to do more and want more and get out of bed and stop working on your thing. So we have a lot of friends that I am happy to say came from personal relationships. A lot of Michelle's clients who just work out with her and say, you're crazy, but I want to see what you do with the kids. And who have been an extended family for us.
So somebody applies for this. They're one of the 10 people selected. What time of year does the application process take place, and when are the 10 people selected?
We actually start our recruiting in October. And this year, we're doing something a little different. I was selected as an ambassador for Lululemon Ross Park. And Change the Game is actually Lululemon's Here to Be partner. So they gave us some funding, a small grant, and our kids are going to be introduced to yoga. And so it's going to be really, really cool. We've done some yoga events with our kids in the past, but it's going to be a steady yoga process. So we're going to start recruitment in October, and through October, November, and December, our kids will sweat with us. We're going to get out. We're going to work with area. It's great to have Pittsburgh, although we may not be on the face of fitness right now. We have some amazing people in Pittsburgh that are so willing to open their doors. The studios that are in the general vicinity of where most of our kids live have basically said, yes, we want you to come work out here, and no, you're not going to pay us, which is awesome.
So they go through the recruitment process, they go through the application process, and sometime around the turn of the year, they get notified, hey, you're one of the...
January 1st.
They're one of the 10 lucky people.
Correct.
Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago that it was possible if you were selected your junior year, you could come back. Do you have to go through the application process again?
You do not. At that point, you're considered an alumni and a junior leader. So we have two gentlemen who will be joining us. They're both seniors from Propel Braddock Hills High School, and they'll be joining us again for next year. And what they do is they help us basically get the new kids used to our way.
We have our way.
And you know, our way is just boundaries. I mean, we have boundaries and we have expectations. And I think when you set expectations high, every single person will reach for them. Every single person. So
somebody's selected January 1st. What are they going to be doing for the next 6 or 8 months with Change the Game?
Good question. So we will be volunteering. We are working right now, and I can't say with who yet because we don't have the agreement completely figured out, the MOU completely figured out, but we'll be working with a local charity, and we will be donating our time with them. So every other Saturday, we'll be spending time with that local nonprofit. And our kids will be giving back 5 hours on every other Saturday. The off Saturdays, they'll be sweating and they'll be training because we have a trip coming in Alaska at last week of June? Yep. Last week of July. Last week of July. It's going to be 3.5 weeks long. The first full week will be all volunteer service with the Catholic Charities. So our kids will be working there, and they will be ready and raring to go. So
they get the opportunity to learn what it's like to give back. They get the opportunity, I would imagine, for some of them for the first time to exercise or move, and for others, the opportunity to exercise or move where it isn't, as Joanna said, a game or an athletic event. Just move for the sake of moving.
No, absolutely. One of the funniest things, one of the coolest things, I guess, two of our girls, we started the Change the Game Run Club, and our kids, we did very short spurts. Our goal was to run the Great Race, which is actually this weekend, last year. And we trained for it. The kids ran it. They loved it. They were proud of themselves. And then we moved into the next year, and they said, well, we're going to do the run club again, right? So one of our girls went to college at the Art Institute in Chicago. And she posted on her social media a picture of gym memberships for her school. She was waiting in line to get authorized for her gym membership. And she said, this is what Change the Game does to you. And then another young lady, she posted a picture of her uniform. She is now on the cross-country track team at Bethany University. So it was really, really cool to see two of the girls that just graduated from our program. They're furthering that.
We're talking to Michelle and Joanna. They are the founders, chief poopahs, for lack of a better term, of Change the Game. One more time for people who are listening, give us the 30-second, and I say this in the positive way, spiel. Somebody sees you walking around maybe with a Change the Game t-shirt on or a scarf or a hat, and they say, well, what the heck is Change the Game?
We are a youth development organization who brings people together through shared suffering, community service, and movement to build a family and a community.
I think that's a good place to leave it. If you're interested in more information on this, we'll have contact information so that you'll be able to contact them. I'm sure they're looking for funding for things. They're always willing to share their knowledge. And if you wanted to start a chapter or somebody doing something similar in other schools, I'm sure they would be more than willing to share their knowledge. Ladies, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to FitLab Pittsburgh about the ethos. Really, movement is part of what makes your life complete.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.